The Carnival of Shadows. The crisp October wind carried a sense of foreboding as renowned detective Elliot Grayson descended the cobblestone steps of his townhouse. A simple, yet elegant, invitation rested in the inner pocket of his overcoat. It had arrived 2 days earlier, written in Clara Hawthorne's unmistakable, flourishing handwriting. Dearest Elliot, adventure beckons. You simply must join me at the Grand Carnival at Blackthorn Manor this weekend. While it promises all the usual fanfare, bright lights, elaborate costumes, and a pinch of the peculiar I have a most curious premonition. I've been tasked with designing a murder mystery game, but I cannot shake the feeling that something darker is afoot. Your keen eye and sharper wit would be a welcome comfort in this carnival of shadows. Yours, as always, Clara. Elliot had smiled at the letter Clara. With her penchant for the dramatic, had always made the mundane sound extraordinary. Yet, there was an undertone to her words that lingered like a faint echo of dread. And so, with his trusty cane in hand and his mind alight with possibilities, he had set out for Blackthorn Manor. The manor emerged like a spectral giant from the mist, its towers reaching into a gray sky streaked with faint ribbons of orange from the setting sun. Blackthorn Manor was a place of legend and opulent estate that had hosted nobility, scandals, and whispered tales of curses for centuries. Tonight, it was alive with the crackling energy of carnival music and the murmur of excited guests. Elliot's arrival was met with a burst of vibrant color. Carnival tents, adorned with intricate patterns and glowing lanterns, sprawled across the vast lawns. Jugglers tossed flaming torches, fortune-tellers beckoned with glittering crystal balls, and a troupe of masked performers moved gracefully through the crowd. It was a tableau of chaos and beauty, carefully orchestrated to enchant and bewilder. Clara's voice pulled him from his observations. "Elliot, there you are, my ever-reliable knight in slightly wrinkled armor." Turning, Elliot found Clara in an emerald-green gown that shimmered under the lantern light. Her auburn curls framed a face brimming with equal parts mischief and concern. A small notebook was clutched in her hand, the corner of its pages bent and smudged with ink. "Clara," Elliot said, his voice warm despite his naturally measured tone, "you've outdone yourself. This carnival could rival any I've seen in my travels. But your letter suggested something unsettling." Clara's smile faltered. "It's just a feeling," she admitted, lowering her voice as a passing troupe of clowns laughed a little too loudly nearby. "The game I've devised, it's meant to be harmless fun. A staged murder, clues to follow, secrets to uncover. But the mannered, here is an energy here, something heavy, and some of the guests, they're not who they claim to be." Elliot arched an eyebrow. "Not who they claim to be." "Call it an author's intuition," she replied. "I've overheard snippets of conversations. One man, claiming to be a baron, speaks with the accent of a dock worker. Another, who says she's a countess, clutches her purse every time someone passes too close. And then T here is him." Clara tilted her head toward a tall figure standing near a carousel. The man's face was partially obscured by the brim of a wide hat, and his gloved hands rested on an ornate cane. He watched the crowd with an intensity that made Elliot's instincts prickle. "Who is he?" Elliot asked. "No one knows," Clara whispered. "He arrived uninvited. Calls himself Mr. Sable. When I approached him, he said only one thing: every carnival needs its shadows." Then he walked away. Elliot studied the man for a long moment before returning his gaze to Clara. "You did well to call me." The evening unfolded with a blend of wonder and unease. Elliot accompanied Clara through the carnival, noting details with a practiced eye. The crowd was diverse. Nobility, artists, eccentrics, and laborers mingled under the guise of anonymity provided by elaborate masks and costumes. Yet, beneath the laughter and applause, there was an undercurrent of tension. As the clock struck 9, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the carnival. A booming voice echoed from the grand stage at the heart of the grounds. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Carnival of Shadows. Tonight, you are not merely spectators, you are players in a grand game of intrigue. Follow the clues, unravel the mysteries, and uncover the truth. But beware, not all truths are meant to be found." Clara leaned toward Elliot. "That's not the speech I wrote." Elliot's jaw tightened. "Who gave it?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely audible. "It wasn't the announcer I hired." The game began in earnest. Guests were given cards with cryptic instructions, guiding them to various locations around the manor and carnival ground. Elliot and Clara, pretending to be players, moved through the throngs, observing the dynamic. At the shooting gallery, a woman's scream pierced the night. Elliot was the first to arrive. A man lay slumped against the side of the booth, a crimson stain spreading across his white shirt. In his hand was a card marked with the symbol of a black thorn. "It's part of the game," a guest muttered nervously. "It has to be." But Elliot's sharp gaze caught the flicker of true fear in Clara's eyes. The blood looked far too real, and the man's stillness was unnerving. Kneeling, Elliot checked for a pulse. His grim expression confirmed what Clara had already suspected. "He's dead," Elliot said quietly. The crowd recoiled, whispers spreading like wildfire. Clara's face turned pale as she gripped Elliot's arm. "This isn't part of the game." Elliot rose to his full height, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. Return to the main tent immediately. The carnival is temporarily suspended." As the guests hesitated, a chilling laugh rang out. Mr. Sable stepped into the light, his face obscured by a silver mask. "Oh, but Detective Grayson," he drawled, "to you here is the fun in that. The game has only just begun." As the last rays of sunlight melted into the twilight, the sprawling estate of Blackthorn Manor transformed into a scene out of a dreamer, perhaps a nightmare. The carnival had begun in earnest, with the manor grounds alive with an explosion of sights, sounds, and scents. Lanterns swayed from trees like enchanted fireflies, their warm glow casting long shadows on the cobblestone paths. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted chestnuts, sweet caramel, and the faint tang of smoke from the fire-eaters' torches. Elliot Grayson moved through the throng of masked revelers, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. Clara had vanished into the crowd, her role as the game's creator requiring her to oversee its progress. Elliot, however, couldn't shake the unsettling sense that the night's entertainment would soon turn deadly. His mask, a gilded visage of a lion, concealed his expression but did little to hide the commanding presence that seemed to silence conversations wherever he passed. Lord Whitmore raised a glass of champagne, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Carnival of Shadows. Tonight, we cast aside our mundane lives and embrace the extraordinary. Let the games begin." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Elliot caught a flicker of unease in the eyes of those closest to Whitmore's butler, the maid, and even the head chef. It was subtle, but it was there. Elliot had seen such looks before, in the faces of those burdened with secrets. As the carnival unfolded, Elliot's observations turned to the attractions scattered across the estate. There was the Hall of Illusions, its mirrored walls distorting every reflection into grotesque shapes. The carousel, with its painted horses seeming to come alive in the flickering lamplight, played a haunting tune that lingered long after one moved away. Jugglers, stilt walkers, and acrobats dazzled the crowd, yet even their practiced performances seemed to carry an undercurrent of tension. Detective Grayson, enjoying the festivities? Elliot turned to find Lord Whitmore beside him, champagne glass in hand. The lion mask was now pushed to one side, revealing a face marked by deep lines and piercing eyes. Whitmore's gaze was calculating, as if he were sizing up the detective. "It's certainly unique," Elliot replied, careful to keep his tone neutral. "You've spared no expense." Whitmore chuckled. "When one has the means, why not indulge?" He paused, studying Elliot. "You strike me as a man who's not easily impressed." "I've seen much in my line of work," Elliot admitted. "But this is something else entirely." Whitmore smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. A carnival should always keep its audience guessing. Enjoy the night, detective. Who knows, you might uncover a secret or two." The staged murder mystery game began at midnight. Clara, dressed in an elaborate costume resembling a Victorian governess, played the victim. Guests gathered in the main tent, where she dramatically collapsed onto a chaise lounge, clutching a prop dagger in her chest. "I've been betrayed," she gasped, her voice theatrical yet convincing. "The answer lies with the Black Rose." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd as Clara went limp. A host explained the rules. Guests were to search for clues hidden around the manor to uncover the murderer. The winner would receive a lavish prize and, of course, bragging rights. Elliot observed from the sidelines, his gaze sharp as a blade. While the guests dispersed, eager to begin the hunt, he noticed Clara slipping out of the tent, her notebook clutched tightly. He followed at a distance. Clara made her way to the edge of the grounds, where the staff quarters and utility sheds were located. She paused near the gardener's shed, her brow furrowed as she examined something on the ground. Elliot approached, his footsteps silent. "Clara," he called softly. She jumped, spinning around. "Elliot, you startled me." "What are you doing out here?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. She hesitated, then gestured to the ground. "I found this near the shed. It's odd." Elliot crouched to examine the object. It was a black rose, real but unnaturally vibrant, its petals shimmering in the moonlight. Beside it was a scrap of paper with a single word scrawled in an unsteady hand. "Croft." "Thomas Croft, the groundskeeper?" Elliot asked, rising to his feet. Clara nodded. "He's a quiet man, keeps to himself. But something about this feels wrong." A sudden scream shattered the night. Elliot and Clara exchanged a glance before running toward the source of the sound. They found the guests gathered near the hedge maze, their faces pale with shock. At the center of the commotion was the lifeless body of Thomas Croft. He lay sprawled on the grass, his eyes wide open and unseeing. A dark stain spread across his chest, and a black rose rested on his chest, identical to the one Clara had found. "This isn't part of the game," someone murmured, their voice trembling. Elliot stepped forward, his commanding presence silencing the crowd. "Everyone, return to the main tent, now." The guests hesitated but obeyed, their whispers filling the air as they moved away. Clara knelt beside Croft's body, her hands trembling. "Elliot, this is real," she whispered. "Someone killed him, and they wanted us to find him," Elliot said grimly. He pointed to the rose. "This isn't a coincidence, it's a message." "For who?" Clara asked. Elliot's gaze darkened. "For me." As the guests regrouped in the main tent, Elliot began his investigation. The carnival's enchantment was broken. replaced by a heavy tension. Lord Whitmore, visibly shaken, demanded answer. "Detective Grayson, I insist you find the culprit immediately," he said, his voice tight with anger and fear. "I'll need full access to the estate and its records," Elliot replied. "And I'll need to speak to everyone, guests and staff alike." Whitmore hesitated, but nodded. "Very well. Do what you must." As Elliot moved through the crowd, questioning and observing, a chilling realization settled over him. The carnival's magic had hidden many things, but now the shadows were revealing their truth, and someone among them was a killer. Elliot Grayson stood in the grand study of Blackthorn Manor, his sharp gaze fixed on the ornate fireplace. The warmth of the flames did little to dispel the growing chill of unease that had settled over the house. Outside, the carnival's festivities had all but ceased, the joyous laughter and vibrant music replaced by whispers of fear and hurried footsteps. Thomas Croft's murder had cracked open the facade of the Whitmore family's perfect life. Elliot knew from experience that such cracks often revealed the rot beneath. The first lead came from Clara. "Elliot, I've noticed something odd about Lady Beatrice," Clara began hesitantly. They sat in the drawing room, away from prying ears. "She's been disappearing late at night, always to the greenhouse. I don't think Lord Whitmore knows." Elliot nodded thoughtfully. "And you believe her actions are connected to Croft's murder?" "I can't say for sure, but it's unusual. Beatrice isn't the type to get her hands dirty unless she's hiding something." Later that evening, Elliot found himself in the greenhouse. The air inside was thick and humid, the scent of earth and exotic plants mingling with something sharper, perhaps fear. He found Lady Beatrice at the far end, speaking in hushed tones to a man who didn't belong. The man was gaunt, his clothes patched and worn. A letter changed hands, and Elliot caught the whisper of a promise. "I'll find a way. Just keep quiet." Elliot stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Lady Beatrice, care to explain what you are doing here?" The color drained from her face as she spun around. "Detective Grayson, what are you doing here?" "The better question," Elliot said, gesturing to the man who looked ready to bolt, "is what he's doing here." The man hesitated, then fled through a side door. Elliot didn't pursue no yet. His focus remained on Lady Beatrice, who was now trembling. He's just an old friend," she stammered. "An old friend you are paying to keep quiet?" Elliot's tone sharpened. "What does he know, Lady Beatrice?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. "Please, detective, if my husband finds out—" "Your secrets won't stay hidden forever," Elliot said, his voice cold. "And in this house, secrets can be deadly." The next morning, Elliot's investigation turned to Oliver Whitmore, the eldest son. Oliver was a man whose charm masked a reckless nature. Rumors of gambling debts had followed him for years, and now those whispers were growing louder. Elliot caught him in the study, rifling through Lord Whitmore's desk. "Looking for something?" Elliot asked, his voice startling Oliver, who slammed the drawer shut. "Just checking on some family documents," Oliver replied, his smile unconvincing. Elliot stepped closer. "Documents related to your inheritance, perhaps, or maybe a way to cover your debts." Oliver's smile faltered. "I don't know what you are talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Elliot said, his voice low. "Thomas Croft's death wasn't random. Someone wanted him silenced, and I am beginning to think it's because he knew too much." Oliver's hands clenched into fists. "You have no proof." "Not yet," Elliot admitted, "but secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when someone's desperate." Evelyn Whitmore, the youngest of the family, was as quiet as she was striking. Her soft-spoken nature often left her overlooked, but Elliot knew better than to underestimate anyone. He noticed her stealing away during the chaos, heading toward the edge of the estate where the old chapel stood. Following her discreetly, Elliot discovered Evelyn meeting a young woman dressed in simple clothes. The two embraced, their affection unmistakable. "Evelyn," Elliot called out, stepping from the shadows. Evelyn's face turned pale, and the young woman quickly stepped back. "Detective, what are you doing here?" "I might ask you the same question," Elliot replied, his gaze shifting between the two women. "A secret relationship, especially one that would upset your family's carefully curated image, it's a dangerous game." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "This has nothing to do with Thomas. Please, you have to believe me." "Maybe it doesn't," Elliot said, his voice softening slightly. "But secrets have a way of entangling themselves. Tell me everything." The deception unravels. The masked figure was not merely an observerno. They were a player in this dark game of deception, moving through the estate like a shadow. Each time Elliot thought he had solved a puzzle, every time he thought he had cornered the truth, the figure seemed to be one step ahead, guiding him closer to the answer, leading him down a path of confusion. A trail of breadcrumbs that circled back upon itself. The cryptic notes had become more frequent, each one more unsettling than the last, and with every new note came a new twist that unraveled a different layer of the Whitmore family's twisted legacy. There was no safe corner left to hide in this grand house. Elliot's every move was being watched. Every word spoken by the family members, every glance exchanged, now felt loaded with hidden meanings. It was as if he was caught in an elaborate charade where the stakes were life and death, and the only thing that was certain was that nothing could be trusted, not the game, not the players, and certainly not the masked figure that seemed to lurk around every corner. As the game unfolded, Clara, the mastermind behind the murder mystery, became an enigma in herself. Once so eager to tell Elliot everything about her creation, she had grown silent. Her face was pale, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she adjusted the props for the game, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for something or someone. The anxiety in her posture was palpable, and Elliot couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that the game she had designed, so carefully crafted to entertain, had morphed into something far darker. What was once a clever diversion now felt like a smokescreen that hid the true motive of the players, who seemed to be dancing to a tune Elliot couldn't hear. Clara's unease made him question her role in all of this. Was she an unwilling participant, caught in the web spun by someone more dangerous? Or was she a willing accomplice? Someone who had known from the beginning that the game wasn't just about solving a fictional murder, but about concealing a far more sinister truth. The deeper Elliot dug into the Whitmore family's past, the more twisted the story became. The clues led him down a dark and winding pathone that revealed not only the family's hidden secrets, but also the shocking truth about their patriarch's death. Victor, the eldest son, had always been a man of power, charm, and control. He was the kind of man who wore his wealth and influence like a badge, and yet, beneath the polished surface, Elliot found traces of something far more sinister. There were whispers, rumors that had long circulated the estate, murmurs of shady dealings, business transactions that weren't on the books, meetings with men whose names never appeared in public records, and stories of illicit affairs that might have had far-reaching consequences. But it was the whispers about the accident, the supposed accident, that had claimed the life of their father that caught Elliot's attention. As he uncovered more, Elliot was struck by the realization that what had been sold to the family as an unfortunate, tragic accident might not have been an accident at all, there were signs, subtle but damning. The truth had been buried beneath layers of lies and half-truths. Some of the family members had whispered about a plot scheme that had been hatched years before, one that would ensure Victor's inheritance of the family fortune, no matter the cost. There were even suggestions that their father's death had been orchestrated as a means to clear the path for Victor's rise to power. Elliot's heart raced as the puzzle pieces clicked together. The more he pieced together, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a game. This was a web of manipulation, deceit, and greed that stretched back decades, and the gamiz so-called murder mystery that Clara had crafted was simply a smokescreen, a distraction meant to keep the family occupied while someone, or something, worked in the shadows to seal their fate. Every revelation sent shivers down Elliot's spine. The Whitmore family had built its empire on lies, on secrets that no one dared to speak aloud. And now, it seemed that the family's darkest secrets were coming to the surface, one horrifying truth at a time. The walls of the grand estate, once a symbol of wealth and power, now felt like they were closing in on him. Elliot could no longer tell where the game ended and reality began. The masked figure's cryptic notes seemed to be guiding him closer to the truth, but the more he uncovered, the more he realized that the truth was a dangerous thing to seek in a house built on deception. Who could he trust? And more importantly, how far would they go to keep their secrets buried? Clara's hands trembled as she grasped the edge of a nearby table for support. And the will wasn't just about inheritance. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. Absolute control. Whoever controls the Whitmore fortune controls everything. And that control, that power, Elliot, it's worth killing for. Her voice shook with a mixture of fear and regret. Our father wasn't just some old man who died by accident. He was taken, killed, and it was all planned to be someone within the family. They needed him out of the way to put their own plans in motion. The will wasn't meant to pass on the fortune, it was meant to secure the future of someone who had been waiting, patiently, for years. Someone who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Elliot's stomach churned as he absorbed the magnitude of her words. The Whitmore family's wealth wasn't just a treasure, it was a weapon, a tool for manipulation. But there was more. The will clause that had once seemed like a simple legal detail was, in reality, a ticking time bomb designed to tear the family apart. Whoever controlled that will controlled their future, and someone was willing to spill blood to claim it. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she choked out the final revelation. It's Victor. Victor was the one behind it all. He's been playing us, all of us, for years. And now, with the will, he'll finally get everything. The money, the power, the control. But it won't stop there. He won't be satisfied until he's destroyed every last one of us. Elliot stood in stunned silence, the weight of Clara's words crashing down on him. He had suspected something dark about Victor, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. The eldest Whitmore son was a master manipulator, a man who had used his family's love and loyalty as pawns in his game. He had orchestrated the death of their father, hidden the truth about the will, and now he was using the game a harmless family diversion to distract everyone while he executed his final plan. But Elliot knew one thing for certain. Victor wouldn't stop until he had destroyed everything, and that included Clara. It was clear now she had been caught in a trap, forced into complicity by the same twisted mind that had set the whole thing in motion. And the masked figure, the one who had been toying with them all night, was Victor's ally. Someone who was just as ruthless, just as dangerous. As the first rays of dawn cut through the thick fog that hung over the Whitmore estate, The grand house seemed to sigh a long, weary exhale that echoed through the empty hallways. The game had ended, but the scars it left behind were deep and irreversible. The masked figure, once a shadow lurking in the corners of the estate, had disappeared as mysteriously as they had arrived. The cryptic notes, the twisted games, the dark secrets, they were all gone, scattered like ashes in the wind. But their impact would remain forever etched in the minds of those who had played. Elliot stood at the gates of the estate, the vast, imposing structure looming behind him, its windows dark and lifeless. He had solved the puzzle, uncovered the truth, and witnessed the destruction of an empire built on lies. But with the dawn came an unsettling silence, a silence that hung heavy in the air, as though the very world was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. The Whitmore family had once been untouchable, their wealth and power a fortress that shielded them from the truth. But now, the walls had crumbled, exposing their darkest secrets for all to see. The shocking revelations about Victor, the deadly game that had played them all, and the sinister forces at work within the family had turned their world upside down. And yet, despite all the chaos, there was no sense of closure, no finality to the story. It was as if the game was still going on, the pieces scattered and the players still moving, their fates hanging by a thread. Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The family was far from innocent, and the truth had only scratched the surface. He had watched them betray each other, manipulate the very fabric of their own bloodline, and cover up murder with the most elaborate of schemes. There was no redemption for them, not now, not ever. But as he turned his back on the estate and began to walk away, the questions lingered, unanswered, swirling in his mind like a storm that refused to subside. What would happen to them now? To Clara, to Victor, to the others who had been ensnared in this web of deception? Could they ever escape the consequences of their actions, or would they continue to spiral into their own destruction, each player in the game doomed to play their part? Elliot didn't know the answers, but he knew this. The Whitmore family would never be the same again. Their legacy had been shattered, their future uncertain. And as he disappeared into the distance, the gates of the estate closing behind him with a final, ominous clang, one question gnawed at his mind, echoing louder than all the others. Who would be next? Elliot paused at the edge of the road, the sun now fully risen, casting long shadows over the landscape. He turned back one last time, his gaze sweeping over the estate. The game was over, but the consequences were only beginning. There would be no more hiding, no more distractions. The Whitmores had made their move sand now. They would face the consequences. The game of deception had claimed its victims, but who would be the next to fall? The answer was uncertain, a terrifying mystery still waiting to unfold. As Elliot walked away, he couldn't help but wonder, was the masked figure still out there, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next move in this deadly game? Or had they, too, become another casualty in a world where no one could ever truly win? He didn't know. But one thing was certain, the game was far from over.